Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about job interviews, or actually interviews for anything. I've certainly had my fair share of those myself. I've also now actually in the last few years also started to recruit myself. So I'm actually getting a sense on the other side basically on what as an interviewer you're looking for. And therefore I'm trying to give you my top tips for a successful interview today. First off, let me say congratulations for the interview itself, because if you got invited to the interview already, you've actually already passed one of the most difficult stages in any pre-application process. Keep in mind that the company already likes you or likes your application. The interview really is just there to confirm whatever they're seeing. Now this should be an obvious one, of course, hopefully, and I hope that you've already done a lot of research before even applying about the company and done some research into the job positions, of course. But now, of course, it's really crucial to go into more granular levels. I mean, you really need to find out the organizational structure, the hierarchy, simple things like when it was founded, current CEOs, and really try to find out the focus areas, what are they really focusing on, the different departments probably, and very important, always find out what they've been recently in the news for. Were there any news recently about that company, about the organization or university you're applying at? That always comes very good in an interview if you're able to chip this in, that you're aware of something that recently happened. So try to find out about that as well. If you're lucky, you actually know the person who's interviewing you, or the persons actually, could be more than one, of course. That is absolutely gold for you, because then I would highly encourage you, try to find as much out about that person as you can. And LinkedIn, to be honest, is wonderful for that. When it comes to the interview, at the end of the day, it's a personal conversation with another human being, right? They're all humans as well on the other side. We tend to forget this sometimes. So it's all about trying to create a personal relationship in that moment as well, or for those 20 minutes or 1 hour, however long the interview is. So if you realize certain maybe parallels or certain common interests, that could help you to use this within the interview and establish that sort of personal connection and speak to their emotions, which is also very important. So try to find out as much as you can about the people that are interviewing you, if you can and if you know the name. Now this, I think, is a topic that people have slightly different opinions, and certainly it does slightly depend maybe on the position you're applying for and also the employer itself, of course. If you apply for a position at a bank, might be slightly different than applying for a position with an NGO. But generally speaking, my rule is always you cannot overdress for an interview, whether it is a job interview or a university interview or whatnot. You cannot overdress. So make sure you look the part. So in some cases, of course, that might mean a suit and tie, and in others, it might just be enough to wear a shirt and a trouser for the guys, on a skirt and a nice shirt and a jacket maybe on top for the girls. But generally speaking, I would always say make sure you dress well. You cannot overdress. And also, by the way, especially when you apply for any of these sort of modern companies or tech companies, yes, it's, of course, they're well known to be very relaxed, easygoing. You can come to work in a t-shirt and sandals or whatnot. But when it comes to an interview, still make sure you look the part. You cannot overdress for a job interview. So please don't let this be the reason you don't get a job. Make sure you look good. Also make sure that you prepare a professionally looking folder that you can take to the interview with you, and always have all the documents ready. So needless to say, you should have your CV in there, and also have a copy of that, by the way, and any other documents that you either refer to in the application or you actually submitted within the application, because sometimes they might just ask for one, or you can actually use it and highlight it on the spot, which always comes well. So make sure you have the original documents plus a copy with you in that folder. Also is good because you can actually include notes in there. You can come with a notepad within there, where you've also have written down some questions, and we'll come to that in a minute. Make sure you bring your documents to the interviews. Now, before you go to the interview, it is absolutely crucial, and I think this is where a lot of people fail, because they think, I'm just gonna, go to the interview and I'll be fine. At the end of the day, if they want me, I'll be fine. But make sure you practice the questions, or better, the answers to it. It is similar to good presentations. People don't understand how much time it takes to rehearse and practice a very good presentation. And this is nothing else than a presentation of yourself. Make sure when you go through the questions, and I will address some of the most common questions in a bit, but make sure that you go through all the different questions that might come up, and make sure you practice the answers you want to give them. Best things to do is obviously to write them down for yourself first of all. You can either do it with bullet points, you can write out the full answers, depending on what you can work with best. Then next stage, I would say practice in front of a mirror, so you can work a little bit as well on your appearance and your body language, but don't just leave it as that, because mirrors can be sometimes a little bit deceiving. Also make sure that you ask a friend or somebody you trust and actually rehearse the questions and answers with them and in front of them and listen to their feedback. So make sure, practice, practice, practice. Now, when it comes to the actual interview, I hope I don't need to stress how important it is to be on time. So I'm not even going to make it a special point, but needless to say, you have to be on time. I would say try to be there at least about 15 minutes or so before the scheduled interview. Of course, don't be there too early, but just try to obviously estimate traffic and what day of the week it might be and so on, so that even if anything happens, you're still on time. So about 15 minutes before, roughly. As soon as you walk inside the building, and that might be a surprise to some of you, but let me tell you, the interview starts the second you walk into the building. So make sure you're spot on from that moment onwards. You smile, you're charming, you greet everybody, because you never know who you're actually meeting. The person you might have just passed in the corridor could have been the boss of the one that is interviewing actually, or might be your ultimate boss. You never know if the secretary is sort of the right hand of the interviewer maybe, and she might be able to influence things potentially. So always make sure as soon as you enter the building, the interview has started. Also means that don't sit there if you're waiting for the interview to start and you play on your phone or you take phone calls or whatnot. The phone should be already off, in your pocket, in your bag somewhere, the second you walk inside the building. Very important. Body language is absolutely crucial. A lot of people have stressed this before, saying that body language is actually more important than what you say and the answers you give. So body language cannot be stressed enough. And this obviously starts with simple things as smiling, giving a good handshake when you walk into the room, greet people by their name if you know their name already, present yourself, who you are again, and just generally try to come across with a very positive attitude. So a lot of people often recommend to have some sort of icebreaker in the beginning, just to, keep it easy and try to create a nice atmosphere to have the interview in. But I want to warn you though, be very careful of what you're going to say as an icebreaker, because some people tend to crack some jokes. Remember, you're nervous in that moment, so you might actually end up telling a very, very awkward joke. So only have an icebreaker if you're absolutely sure that it's going to work well. Otherwise, rather leave it and try to build that relationship over time in the interview. Another thing, of course, the way you sit. Make sure that you don't lean against the chair the whole time. Make sure you sit upright, up front, towards the interviewer. And one absolute no-go is don't cross your arms in front of your chest. That is an absolute no-go. Make as much eye contact as you can. In case there's more than one interviewer in front of you, of course, make sure that you look at each of them, smile at them again. And if you can, it is also, of course, good to use your hands, right? To make some gestures. But of course, that doesn't necessarily come easy to all of you. So try to also not do it if you're not absolutely comfortable with it. This is something, for example, you could practice in front of a mirror. Which type of gestures you're comfortable with, which ones come natural to you, what maybe you do normally anyway. And if you like it, of course, that's great. If you don't like it, try to change it. So now coming to the questions and the answers. I want you to keep in mind that oftentimes recruiters or interviewers are not necessarily looking for the correct answer. And sometimes, to be honest, in some companies, they actually ask you questions that don't even have a correct answer. But really what they're interested in is to look how you're trying to tackle the answer and the structure basically and the framework you're using to try to come to an answer, whether it's the right one or the wrong one. It doesn't really matter oftentimes. So keep that in mind. Don't get nervous or panic if you feel like you won't be able to answer the question. Just think very methodologically. Ask questions back, by the way. If you don't entirely understand the question, it is a very good sign if you ask clarifying questions back to the interviewer. So make sure you fully understand the question first. Try to think very strategically, and that is often already something that the recruiter will highly value. Also, of course, try to keep your answers generally short and to the point. Of course, there shouldn't just be like one-word answers, but also don't go on rambling for 5 minutes in one answer, because normally you tend to end up saying things you wouldn't have normally said or you shouldn't have said. So try to keep it short, precise, to the point. And then I think there are just a couple of questions that are generally asked in almost every interview. And I just want to give you my top 3 and talk to you maybe a little bit about what I think are good answers and how you should approach such a question. And this is obviously something that you should and can prepare for upfront. Number 1, I think that every interviewer would ask, tell me about yourself or walk me through your CV. Now, they're not actually really looking for you to walk them through their CV because they've read your CV, right? What they're really looking for is he or she able to outline the sort of the most important and most relevant, emphasis on relevant, experiences or positions or skills that you have based on your CV that are particularly now for this particular interview, for this particular job you're applying for. So that's really key. Another thing is also, of course, they're looking for a very structured approach so that you don't jump from like one of your hobbies, then, where you're born, then your education and whatnot. So a very structured approach. And of course, they're also looking for confidence and passion, really. How you're presenting this. Are you able to convince somebody that this is a great CV? Are you able to send your message basically and show them how great you are? This is really what it's about. The second, the absolute all-time favorites, and you can almost be always sure they're going to ask you in one way or the other. They might not ask it outrightly like it, but they'll definitely have some questions relating to this, is strengths and weaknesses. Now, for the strengths, it is important to emphasize that, of course, you shouldn't come across as arrogant, but also, of course, don't undersell yourself. You definitely have to emphasize the things, top 3, 5 things that you definitely think you're able to execute very well, that you're very good in, and ideally, of course, give examples as well on why you think that and when you have showed that particular skill. Now, for the weaknesses, this is a bit of a tricky thing because a lot of people feel like, why should I mention my weaknesses? This won't be good in an interview. I can tell you right now, the worst answer you can give is that you don't have any weakness, because everybody knows that's a lie. You try to turn the negative into a positive. What I mean by that is that rather than saying, I'm very bad in this, or I have anger issues or whatnot, try to put it as areas for development. I'm very good in A, B, C, but I think I can improve on X, Y, Z. Make it look like you've identified this problem with yourself, but you also already know the solution and what you're working on to make this better. And lastly, I think a question that is often asked at the very end, if the interview generally went well, I would say, is why should we hire you? And again, here it is not about listing all the skills you have, because everybody can say this, I am great at execution and project planning, and X, Y, Z. That is not what they're looking for. They're looking for a few very specific cases and examples where you can say, this is what I've shown in the past, this is a skill or a feature I have, this is the impact that I can have with that particular skill or feature, and this is how I can help your company and why your company really needs me. And what I think you should also bring in with your answer to that question is a personal element, that you think you can contribute to the team, to the culture of the company, that you fit in well, that you bring something to the table, you'll bring something new, you'll add something to the culture in the company. That I think is also something that employees are often looking for. So make sure you bring in the personal element when they ask you why they should hire you. Now that leads me on to my next point, which is, generally speaking, make sure you have a lot of case studies of your previous work. Again, it's not just important to say, I have a degree from Harvard, or I've worked for Mercedes-Benz and whatnot. Much more important than this is actually to say, I believe I'm very good in teamwork, and this is why. And you give a very specific example of when you've shown teamwork skills. And I think the topics you should have cases for are things like teamwork, leadership, problem solving, creativity, innovation. Those are normally the areas that a lot of interviewers are looking for. Make sure that you think of a couple of cases where you have shown one or all of those skills and write them down and make sure you have them ready for you to use whenever they're relevant. And really important with those cases is that you make sure you emphasize on what you have done. We often get tempted to just use, I did a group presentation in university and that was great because I showed great presentation skills or something. But if you say we, people are looking for, okay, tell me exactly what was your impact? How did you approach this problem? How did you solve the problem? So very important as well when you come to those cases, always highlight the impact that you personally had. Now, coming to the end of the interview, one other thing that the interviewer is most likely going to ask you, if everything went well until then, do you have any questions for me? And I cannot stress how important it is to have questions. Again, the worst thing you can actually do and say is, no, that really doesn't show much interest in the company, because it's impossible that there are no questions remaining at the end of the interview or about the company or something. So make sure part of your research in the beginning should actually be to prepare some genuine questions that you might have. You might not be able to ask all of them, and that's fine. But at least if you're able to put in 2 or 3 of those questions, really is a good important sign at the end that you have an interest, again, showing that you're very enthusiastic about the work and that you really want to join the company. Now, I think when you've done most of these things that we just talked about, I think you have a pretty good chance of landing the job, landing that scholarship, or getting into that NGO, whatever it is that you're applying for. So what I would just say in conclusion is, Have a very positive attitude. Do not talk bad about past employers or anything. The interview should be very, very positive. Focus on the positive aspects of everything. Smile, be friendly. Make sure that everybody understands and knows that you're really enthusiastic about the job, you really want the job, and you're the right person. And last but not least, in as much as they're of course looking for skills, more than that, they're looking for people. Companies want to hire people, not skills. So make sure you bring your personality, a personal touch to the interview. That's really what they're looking for. Try to build that personal relationship in that interview. I think if you can do that, you're almost certain you'll get the job. I certainly wish you all the best. Good luck with everything. Let me know if that was useful. Let me know maybe if you get a job after this. Who knows? You never know. And thanks for watching again, guys. All the best. Bye-bye.